Hi, welcome back to the Gear Garage. My name is Zach, and this is my cute little show about whitewater stuff. And today I want to talk about some knots, my 3 favorite knots, 3 knots everybody should know. But first I want to give a quick plug for my friend Tim's book. Tim is the expert in the rivers of the United States. Nobody has seen more miles of rivers in the U.S. than my friend Tim Palmer. And he just finished this book, America's Great River Journeys. It talks about river trips that we know about, the famous ones, the Grand Canyon, the Middle Fork, the Oahe, and on and on and on. A bunch of stuff in California. But let's talk about the lesser known ones. Things in Maine, things in the center of the country. It's just a great compendium of the best river trips in the country. And if you love rivers, you should have this book. This is inspiration. It's also a great gift. So I'll put a link in the bottom where you can, right down below here in the video on YouTube, where you can buy it yourself. I highly recommend it. It's a great book. So today I want to talk about the 3 knots every boater should know. And this is my opinion. I could be wrong. But from my experience, these are the 3 knots that I'd like everybody to know. I was a Boy Scout. I learned knots. I love knots. I probably have only used half of the knots I've learned in real life. But really, it comes down to, for me, for at least rafting, it comes down to 3 knots that I use pretty regularly. And there's a few others that are more advanced, but these are the ones I'd like everybody to know. And so the first one is the bowline. And the bowline's really useful if you just need to tie a rope to something quickly. Just a quick, I need to tie it onto that. And I use this a lot. If somebody throws me a throwback on a raft and I don't have a carabiner, I'll just tie the end of that rope to a D-ring. Or if I'm lowering a raft down a cliff, sometimes I don't have a carabiner on me to do this, so I'll just tie a bowline in the D-ring and lower the boat down. I wouldn't use a bowline for rescue, but it's really handy for just tying things on here and there. Anytime you need to attach a rope to something. So this is something, this is a rope. All we're going to do with the bowline here is go around it, make a little loop-de-doo thing. And I think of it this way. I think of this as being a shark. And a shark comes out of the lake. And I understand that sharks aren't in lakes, but it comes out of the lake, goes around and eats Johnny, and goes back in the lake. Alright? And I'm pretty confident you can't just watch that and know how to do a bowline. It's tricky. You have to practice it a bunch. It's an interesting one. But it comes with this knot that's just a quick, easy thing to tie. And if you pull on it hard and it gets tight, it unties by just pulling the end over. So once you understand this knot, it's really easy to tie and really easy to untie. And useful really quickly. The one alternate I love is this. I call it the snap bowline, or the what do I call it? I guess I call it the snap bowline, but it's a really even easier to untie. And you do the same thing, create a little lake. The shark comes out of the lake, and it goes around Johnny. And instead of putting the shark back in, you put what's called a bight back in. A bight is sort of like a piece of the rope. So the shark actually stays out. So you just shove some of the rope back in there. And the beautiful thing about this is that you can quickly untie it by pulling this rope. And it's off. And so I use the snap bowline quite a bit. It has another name. Quick release bowline or something like that. But I tie that quite a bit just to get them undone. Because again, a bowline is typically a quick, easy tie to something, get it untied and move on. So for rescue situations, if you want to attach to a carabiner or a rope and you're putting heavy loads on something, you want to use a little bit different technique, and that involves a figure 8 on a bight. And a figure 8, just a simple figure 8 knot, is you take the rope, you go around once and again and through. That's a figure 8. If you go around just once, that's an overhand knot, right? So just a simple overhand knot. If you do one more twist, you then have a figure 8. So this is just a straight figure 8. This basically does nothing, right? This is a stopper. You know, if you have this on a bottom of a rope, it'll stop things. But to make this useful, you use a bight. And again, if this is the end of a rope, this is what we call a bight of the rope. Grabbing a bight, kind of a circular end. And if you take the bight of it and you do the exact same thing, you go around once and then one more turn and put it through, that creates a figure 8 on the bight. It's really easy to do once you've practiced it and know how to do it. I like making my knots look pretty. It's called dressing them, so I'm going to make this one look pretty. The prettier they look, the easier they are to untie later on. So I like to mess with mine a little bit. And I know I'm usually in a rush in a rescue situation, but it's worth it to untie it later on. And it makes the knot stronger if you dress it correctly. The beautiful thing about the figure and a bight is it's a way you can attach a carabiner to it, for example, and then the carabiner to a D-ring. So I wouldn't use a bowline for heavy duty stuff, but if I'm pulling heavy duty, I want to use this figure 8 on a bight. And I use it for all kinds of things when I'm boating. I mean, not just rescue, it's just useful for putting a loop in the end of a rope. And once you do that, of course, you do need a carabiner. You can't put this loop into a D-ring without a carabiner. Where the bowline is a quick, easy thing you can do without a carabiner. And then finally is a little bit more of a rescue knot. And even though when you're beginning to go rafting, you're not really doing, you may be doing rescues, but you're not like usually in charge of rescues. You're not always expected to be a rescue professional right away. But one of the early knots you'll learn in rescue is the water knot. And this stuff webbing is really useful when you need some sort of anchor. When you have to tie something to a tree that's heavy duty or tie to a raft or something like this. We call this webbing or hoopy. It's incredibly strong, really versatile, and sometimes you'll need to create an anchor by going around a tree, for example, right? So if you go around, let's say this is a tree or a big rock that this goes around or other things, you need to sort of make a circle around it. And so to make a big loop, you use the water knot. And the water knot is pretty easy conceptually, sometimes harder to tie. You just do an overhand knot with this stuff. That's step one. Really easy overhand knot. And then to finish it, you take the other end and follow it through backwards. And you follow it through, and again, dressing it here is important, making it look pretty. You don't want any twists in here. You want to take your time to dress it and make it look pretty. And have it all follow it nicely. And again, the advantage of dressing it is it'll make it easier to untie later on, and it makes the knot stronger. Anytime you put a knot into some kind of rope, it weakens the rope. It doesn't weaken the rope itself, but it weakens it's weaker. And so once you're done, it makes this beautiful little thing called the water knot. And with the water knot, you want tails. You don't want to have this thing end right here. You want to give it a little bit of distance. And that's, 3 inches or so, plus or minus, is good enough. And this is something then, if it's around a tree or something, you might then tie a carabiner on and attach a rope to or something. And usually when you're using a water knot and an anchor, you're seeing heavy loads. You're going to pull on this pretty hard. It's going to make this knot really tight. And the beautiful thing about the water knot is it's relatively easy to untie. Now, if you're yarding on this with 10 people on your might, it's going to take you 5 minutes of fiddling with it to get it untied. But you'll get it untied. It's actually, once you do it a bunch, it's kind of fun. So that's the water knot. Again, these are the 3 knots that I think that every boater should learn when they're getting started. And everybody should know, again, the bowline, the figure 8 on the bight, and the water knot. If you think there's more knots people should know, please tell me those knots in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think everybody should know. I know there's other knots than bowlines that do that same thing. I'm personally a big fan of standardization. That we all sort of know the same general knots. If I'm using bowlines and you're using something else, I don't know how to untie your knot. I don't know what you did. So I really personally prefer it if boaters all use the same general knots. And I do get that there's other knots that can do some of these same things, and that's cool. And if you have comments about other knots or more knots people should know or any other ideas, please leave a comment below. And that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining me.